Hello, my lovely students. So we're going to take a look at percents, fractions, and decimals now. So the word percent means per 100. Thus, it is equal to 1 over 100, or the decimal 0.01. And we can use that to convert percents to decimals or to fractions. So when we go percents to fractions, we're literally going to change that percent symbol because it means the same thing as 1 over 100. And then you just turn it into one fraction and reduce where you can, which for me is do the calculator, totally fine. So our 7.4 here becomes 7.4 times 1 over 100. And then when you have a decimal in a fraction, we don't like decimals in fractions, what we can do is multiply by however many tens it would take to get the decimal place out of the way, but we have to multiply by a crazy form of 1. So however many tens we need on top, we also multiply by on the bottom. Like that's one way to think about it. Back in the day, my teacher just said, oh, you just move the decimal place on both the same number of times. And it's like, yeah, that works, but do you know why? All right. So since we have one decimal place, we're also going to multiply by 10 over 10. So this is now 74 over 1,000. So what in the heck is 74? I know it's even. I know 1,000 is even, so I got that, but let's think. 2003 times 14, 37. Oh, cool, and 37 is prime. All right. So I am going to divide by 2, divide by 2, and I get 37 over 500. Or, 7.4 times 1 divided by 100, enter, change it to a fraction, poof. All right, 17 3/5% change to a fraction or a mixed number. Okay. This just bothers me now. All right. So the 17 3/5%. If we're going to do the 1 over 100, I find it works best to change that back to an improper. This is like yet another why we don't like mixed numerals. Technically, that is 17 plus 3/5. So when I multiply by the 1 over 100, I have to multiply the 17 by it and the 3/5 by it. But if I convert it back to an improper, then I'm just multiplying that improper by 1 over 100. So 17 wholes split into 5 pieces each is 17 times 5, 85. And then we add the 3 extra we have, so that's 88 over 5. So this is 88/5. And now I'll change the percent to 1 over 100. Now the 88 up here, 100 is 4 quarters. So the quarters are 5s, but the 4, that's 2 times 2. And the 88 is also divisible by 4. It's also divisible by 8, but I can't divide 100 by 8 nicely. So we are going to divide top and bottom by 4. Something on top by 4, something on the bottom by 4. And it doesn't matter which top and bottom as long as it's multiplication between the fractions. This works. So on top, it is now going to be 22. And on the bottom, 100 divided by 4 is 25, that quarter. 5 quarters is $1.25. So that is 125 for the bottom, and that is our reduced fraction. Now, if your calculator has a button that will do mixed numerals, if you type that in and then say times 1 over 100, it should do all this correctly. But if it doesn't have that set up, then I would convert it to an improper and then go from there. Or type in 17 plus 3/5, which would be 17.6, and then say that times 1 over 100. All right, so 0.34% times 1 over 100. Now, just like we did with the tens on the first one, except here there's 2 decimal places I want to get rid of. So I need to multiply the top and the bottom by 100. Whew. So we now have 34 over 10,000, which is a whole bunch of 2s and a whole bunch of 5s. 34 has 1 2 and 17, which doesn't go anymore. So that's all we got to get rid of. $17 over 5,000. This takes forever by hand. And like, really, man, teachers back in the day would ask, are you going to walk around with a calculator in your pocket all the time? And like, legit, the answer now is yes. Someday I will get them to change. Someday. Alrighty then, 125. Change that to 125 times 1 over 100. Now, kind of the flip-flop of what was going on number 2. This is 25s, quarters in here. So we're going to divide 125 by 25 and 100 by 25. So $1.25 is 5 quarters, and 100 or $1 is 4 quarters. So there is 125% as a fraction. It's 5/4 or 1 1/4. A whole and then 1/4 more. Okay. Now percents to decimal, nicer, much nicer. So that whole times 1 over 100 is the same as times 0.01. And what this will do is move the decimal place so the percent gets smaller. One of the ways I remember that is I know 50%. Like that is my go-to best friend percent. Because when we say 50% of something, you should have the gut reaction, hopefully, that that's the same as a half, and that's the same as 0.5. So how do I go from 50 to 0.5? I take the decimal that's here and move it over twice, so it becomes a smaller number. So whichever direction I'm choosing to move the decimal here, which in this case is to the left twice, is the same thing I'm going to do here. You also can just manually crunch the numbers on the calculator. 8.25 times 0.01, answer. And that's what we're going to do on all of them. Well, 8, we're going to have to play with it a little, and then we'll do it. So 6.8 times 0.01, 0.068, no percent sign. Just like all the fractions above, like most people won't put the percent after the fraction, but sometimes people will do it after the decimals. That, just pay attention to that. Now, 53.1 times 0.01, move it twice so it becomes 0.531. And of course you can put the 0 in front, but you don't have to. 245, that's huge, times 0.01 is going to put that decimal between the 2 and the 4. So this is 2 wholes and 45 hundredths. And then 21 and a fifth. So 1/5 is the same as 2/10. I multiplied the top and the bottom by 2. So 2/10 is the decimal 0.2. So this is 21.2 times 100th becomes 0.212 or 212 thousandths. All right. So that's converting from percents. We will do different things in a sec.